Live on News 24, you're watching Sharri.
Good evening. In breaking news tonight, Japan formally raised Anthony Albanese's crude melons joke in a diplomatic cable. The pressure now mounting on the Prime Minister to apologise.
They were insulting and the Prime Minister should make a personal apology.
Albanese's hand-picked Commissioner, Virginia Bell, refuses to call Josh Frydenberg to give evidence at the Royal Commission. Well, James Patterson wants answers and he'll join me live. And it is a big show tonight. Ray Hadley, Steve Price, Mike Kelly and prominent head fund manager Russell Pillemer. A lot to get to. But first to the breaking news that Albanese's crude and sexist melons joke has caused a diplomatic incident. Japan formally raised Albanese's podcast remarks about Japanese Prime Minister Tsunai Takaichi, her gift of melons, in a diplomatic cable. In a highly unusual move, the Japanese government sent a memo to the Prime Minister's department on July 13 raising the issue. Dennis Shanahan tonight reports in The Australian that in the memo there was official concern that the references to smuggling melons into Australia suggested Ms Takaichi's gift of initially 2 Japanese melons and later 4 melons had breached Australia's laws. It was made clear to Albanese's department that the melons, which can be legally imported into Australia following a trade agreement, had been procured locally in Australia and presented as an official gift. The Japanese officials reassured Albanese that Japan would take no official action over this incident. Well, it would be good to know how the Prime Minister responded to this memo and whether he offered an explanation for his sexist remarks. Because let's be clear, this memo is Japan formally putting on the record that it was aware of that undignified podcast where Albanese said this.
The Japanese Prime Minister brought a melon.
Did she smuggle it?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm expecting.
Got a couple of melons.
She brought 2.
She brought 2, as you do.
The former Japanese ambassador to Australia, Shingo Yamagami, wrote in The Australian that it is a time for tolling and not for crude jokes at another's expense. So, Prime Minister, please enjoy Japan's sweet and juicy melons without thinking about a woman's anatomy, and instead focus on what our 2 countries must do together. But this shows the Prime Minister's recklessness and carelessness around such an important bilateral relationship. And Tanya Plibersek's attempted spin this morning on Sunrise was embarrassing.
I completely disagree with that interpretation of what the Prime Minister was saying. I completely disagree.
But she can't spin this. Clearly, senior figures in Japan have been insulted, understandably so. And remember how the Labor ministers all came out against Tony Abbott and Scott Morrison, claiming they had a women problem? But neither of them as Prime Ministers would ever have mimicked juggling a woman's breasts. And now opposition leader Angus Taylor is demanding Albanese apologise, as he should. The Royal Commission has heard from over 200 witnesses, including controversial pro-Palestinian activists and Muslim clerics. But they've refused to hear testimony from the highest-ranking Jewish Australian government minister in history, Josh Frydenberg. The former Treasurer made it clear he wanted to be called as a witness, but he was told on Friday he would not be called to testify. This is despite the Royal Commission hearing from controversial figures like Sarah Schwartz, Shadi Asuleiman, Yasmin Johnson and Dr. Ali Asamal, among others. Now, Yasmin is the National Co-Coordinator of Students for Palestine. And during her appearance at the Commission, she tried to justify violence of the Second Intifada.
I don't hold movements for the justice of the oppressed to a standard that says there can never be any violence. And I think in a context where Palestinians have been put in a concentration camp in Gaza, or at the time were facing massive oppression in Gaza, and the expansion of settlements and so on in the West Bank, that intifada was also a legitimate act of resistance by a people under occupation.
The intifada was terrorism. Then there's Muslim leader Sharri as-Suleiman, who was on Friday invited to give evidence at the Commission. And he was questioned about Sheikh Dudoon's remarks that the October 7 attacks were a day of courage and elation.
Given that there was an ongoing suffering of the Palestinian people, thousands of Palestinians, innocent Palestinians, women and children were massacred and killed. And we agree with the general sentiment of this statement. Having said that, it was not ANIC that led the drafting of this statement.
But that statement that he refers to says that Sheikh Dudoon's comments had been taken out of context by the media. And then just today, Dr. Ali Asamail gave evidence, a man who, according to The Telegraph, has previously urged worshippers to rail against federal Labor MPs, including Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke, for the Albanese government's listing of Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist organisations. And today at the Commission, he was questioned about those mourning ceremonies held here in Australia for the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Can you explain how we as a society, if you like, Dr. Al-Samail, are to reconcile a display of mourning in those circumstances?
The mourning was for a religious leader, a leader in jurisprudence and theology, aside from any political or, authority positions that he held.
And then there's Palestinian activist Sarah Schwartz, who was also called to give evidence at the Commission. So the Commissioner, Virginia Bell, is happy to hear from all of these people and others, but not Josh Frydenberg. Not only is he the most senior Jewish minister in Australian parliamentary history, but he's shown incredible leadership on anti-Semitism over the past few years. He made a documentary with us here at News24, then Sky News, very early on in the anti-Semitism crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your strength. It's gonna be okay.
He also created the Door Foundation to fight anti-Semitism through education. And when the terror attack at Bondi happened, he gave the single most extraordinary speech, one of the greatest orations of our time, where he laid out the path forward. And many have compared it to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address.
The greatest massacre in Australia's history is no hoax. It's no joke. It's a horrible, evil crime. So make no mistake, I am here, we are here, to fight for the soul of Australia and to fight for the survival of the Australian Jewish community that has been here since the arrival of the First Fleet. And this is how our government repays us.
Yeah, it was from the heart. It was brilliant. And in that speech, Josh called for a royal commission. This was on Wednesday, the 17th of December, just 3 days after the massacre.
No ifs, no buts, no equivocations, no distractions. You must call a royal commission into what has happened here and into the rise of anti-Semitism in our country.
But as you know, Albanese refused to call one. And Frydenberg went on to lead the campaign for a royal commission until eventually the Prime Minister relented on the 8th of January. But it's very clear that there would be no current Royal Commission without Frydenberg's mobilising of the community. And yet he is now shockingly being excluded from giving evidence. Well, high-profile Australians have today spoken out about this, including former ASIO Director-General Dennis Richardson, University of Western Sydney Vice-Chancellor Jennifer Westacott, Shana Gutnick, whose father was killed at Bondi, Reuven Morrison, and former Labor Minister Mike Kelly, who'll be on the show shortly. Now, Westacott said in her comments in The Australian today, "It is extraordinary and deeply, deeply distressing that he is not called. This is the most prominent political Jewish leader we've had in our history." And by the way, all of this advocacy has come at an incredible personal cost to Josh, particularly when it comes to his security. Now, in his submission to the Royal Commission, Frydenberg outlines what must be done to tackle anti-Semitism. And he writes this, he says, "What is required now is a policy of zero tolerance for anti-Semitism and hate to drive it back to the fringes of society where it belongs." And ultimately, it's very detailed, but ultimately his plan does boil down to 7 steps. This includes banning the hate preachers, banning the extremist organisations, prosecuting those who incite violence and hate, stopping the hateful protests, investing in education, on immigration, screening out those with anti-democratic views, and having hard security. Now, on this topic, I might mention in passing that I also haven't been called to give evidence at the Commission. Despite my almost singular focus on anti-Semitism since October 7, my coverage from Israel, my documentary on the Bondi terror attack, my upcoming book written with Alex Rivchin, and the Anti-Semitism Summit we organised together. I was advised that the Commissioner personally had my submission, but I was never called to give evidence. Well, given the Commissioner, Virginia Bell, has heard from more than 200 witnesses, including, as I said, pro-Palestinian activists, there is speculation in the Jewish community that the only explanation for the decision not to hear testimony from Josh Frydenberg or me is that it was politically motivated, owing to our criticism of the Albanese government's lack of leadership. What other explanation can there be? And it also explains why political leaders responsible for the handling of these issues, like Anthony Albanese, Penny Wong and Tony Burke, haven't been called to the witness stand. And it makes you wonder if this Royal Commission is running a protection racket for the Albanese government. And joining me now is Shadow Defence Minister James Paterson, live from Canberra. James, great to see you tonight, and a lot of news to get through. I want to start with the breaking news story that Japan did raise this podcast in a diplomatic cable. James, do you think this shows that they were aware and concerned about those sexist comments made by the Prime Minister?
Sharri, from the excerpts that I've read of the diplomatic cable from Japan to Australia, it's very clear that they don't want this to be a public controversy, that they don't want to talk about it. Frankly, I don't want to talk about it. Every time I see that footage or hear that footage again, it is even one of the most cringeworthy things I've ever seen an Australian Prime Minister say about any other political figure, let alone the leader of one of our closest and most important allies. But the reality is, it is out in the public. It is being talked about. It has become a source of irritation in our relationship, as we've seen from the comments today via the former ambassador of Japan to Australia. And we've also seen comments from former advisor to Shinzo Abe, the previous Japanese Prime Minister, commentary in Japanese media. So this is a problem. It's a problem of the Prime Minister's own making. He put himself in that situation. He made those comments. He made that crude gesture. He raised his eyebrows in the most cringe-inducing way. He's the only person who can fix this, and he should fix it by making a clear and contrite apology.
Do you think there's also a level of hypocrisy from Labor figures, including Tanya Plibersek?
Well, just ask yourself, Sharri, if a male Liberal leader made any sort of equivalent comments about any other female political leader, let alone one of our closest and most important allies, what do you think Penny Wong would say about it? When do you think the Labor Party would let go of that? When do you think they would let that slide? They would never let that slide. They would rigorously prosecute that until there was a formal and grovelling public apology. Frankly, they've prosecuted things far less controversial than this.
I just want to return to the Royal Commission, which has, as you just heard, declined to hear testimony from Josh Frydenberg. Do you think there should be an explanation from the Commissioner about this?
Yes, I think the bare minimum is there needs to be an explanation as to why Josh Frydenberg, our most prominent political leader from the Jewish community, and someone whom without there would never have been a Royal Commission because of his leadership, has not been called. I'm also concerned, Sharri, to learn that you have not been called. Unfortunately, both you and Josh understand the consequences of anti-Semitism in Australia because you have personally experienced it, and I think that would be powerful testimony. But I also agree with another comment you made in your opening editorial, which is that maybe even more importantly, we need the Prime Minister to appear before the Royal Commission. We need the Home Affairs Minister to appear before the Royal Commission. We need the Attorney General and the Foreign Minister to appear before the Royal Commission. They should be cross-examined about what they did and what they didn't do to combat anti-Semitism in the lead up to the horrific terrorist atrocity at Bondi. And if that doesn't happen, well, then I think it'll be very difficult to take this Royal Commission seriously. And I would urge the Commissioner to reflect, not just on what the people who appointed her will think of the work that she does, but what history will judge of this Royal Commission. History will be watching, history will judge. God forbid if there are further atrocities targeting the Jewish community in the future of our country. I wouldn't want to lead a Royal Commission process that wasn't the most thorough, robust, searching examination of that and made the best and strongest recommendations to make sure it never happened again.
Yeah, really strong comments there. And I think you're spot on that these political leaders do need to be called to give evidence. James, this also comes a week after pro-Palestinian activists were able to cross-examine David Ossip, an Australian Jew, over the alleged actions of Israel in Gaza. So, taking that into account, are you concerned also about the direction of the Commission and some of the decisions it's making?
In my view, it wasn't appropriate for an Australian Jewish community leader to be cross-examined at length about Israel's military actions. David Ossip is an Australian Jew. He's not an Israeli. He's not a spokesman for the Israeli government. He's not a spokesman for the IDF. And I also don't understand how it's consistent with the terms of reference of the Royal Commission, which are not to examine Israel's conduct in Gaza or decisions of Israeli government or operations of the IDF. They are to examine anti-Semitism in Australia. And so I understand the arguments made by some in defence of the Royal Commission that this was a matter of procedural fairness, but procedural fairness should not allow a Royal Commission to be diverted from its core business of combating and investigating anti-Semitism. And I think that was an error. I hope it doesn't happen again with future witnesses.
Well said. James, I want to move on to reports in The Australian today that the Albanese government collectively paid 3 media outlets, controversial media outlets, over $500,000. And it's reported that they've previously promoted a problematic Islamic teacher. The Sydney preacher Mohammed Hoblos is banned from Germany, also the Netherlands, over concerns about his ideology. Do you think this is a sign there hasn't been proper vetting before handing out taxpayer-funded grants?
It certainly is, Sharri, and unfortunately it's not a first offence from the Albanese government, or I'm sorry to say the Department of Home Affairs, because last term when I was the Shadow Minister for Home Affairs, we exposed social cohesion grants which went to organisations that were undermining social cohesion by promoting anti-Semitism and glorifying terrorism on their social media accounts. It's even worse in some ways that they've made this mistake, this error again, clearly failing to do their due diligence. Only the Albanese government would think you promote social cohesion by subsidising anti-Semitism, and that's exactly what's happened with these media grants. It's appalling. They should be rescinded, and new processes should be put in place before another dollar goes out the door to any further extremists like this.
Before you go, we learned on the weekend employment data showing that the number of public servants, the public sector, has grown under the Albanese government to nearly 200,000 staff. I mean, how is this sustainable? I mean, this is a productivity issue, certainly a budgeting issue as well.
Well, the only kind of employment growth we're really seeing in our economy right now is in the public service or in closely related social care sectors like the NDIS and health and aged care and education. Now, that's important and worthy work, but it cannot be the only source of economic growth and jobs growth in our country. That's not sustainable, it's not productive, and it will ultimately lead to a poorer Australia. What we need is a private sector-led growth agenda. We need the private sector out there hiring, putting on staff, but they're not, and it's no wonder with the economic policies of this government.
Right, Senator James Paterson, really appreciate your time live from Canberra on a sitting week. Thank you. All right, well, in other news now, support for the Albanese government, according to today's news poll, has plunged to its lowest level since Julia Gillard was in office over a decade ago. Today's news poll shows the government has plunged to 29%, tying with One Nation. Still well ahead of the coalition, though, which sits on 18%. And joining me to discuss tonight's panel, News24 host Steve Price and former Labor Minister Mike Kelly. Great to see you both. Well, Steve, seems Albanese is now as unpopular as Julia Gillard was.
Yeah, and look what happened to Julia Gillard. They got rid of her, didn't they? And they went back to Kevin Rudd. So it's not surprising that they are getting very nervous about One Nation. And when you look at those numbers of the Labor Party and One Nation both sitting on 29, it really is a major worry, particularly, I think, for the Labor Party in the outer suburban seats in places like Melbourne, in the northern suburbs and the western suburbs. You looked at some of the numbers last week in another poll around Newcastle in New South Wales, and One Nation is doing extremely well. But the other really disturbing figure there must be causing sleepless nights for Angus Taylor. To have that primary vote sitting at 18%, that is just death zone country. I don't know what the Liberal Party are going to do, but he's in all sorts of trouble.
Well, unless he can lift it, he is, that's for sure. Mike, I mean, you obviously used to be colleagues when you were a minister in the last Labor government with many of the people now running the country. What do you think is causing this loss in support for the Albanese government?
Well, as Steve's just pointed out, this is a real crisis for the public confidence in the major parties, in the traditional structures of our political system. And I guess we've seen this playing out internationally where a lot of people, don't feel the system has served their interests, have looked after their grievances, and so they lash out and want to break the system. And this, I think, is also a reflection of some of the more specific issues that we have in Australia, part of which is what you've been talking about, is where people are deeply concerned about Islamist extremism and terrorism, and One Nation has been conflating that with immigration, and there's some aspects of that are legitimate grievances. Are we properly vetting people? Are we managing to do our due diligence? Well, I think our agencies and the Border Force and people responsible for managing our borders are not being properly served with the state-of-the-art technology that would help them do that. And particularly when we're talking about converting people from temporary to permanent visas, unless you're doing your due diligence in that space, you're not serving the country properly. So these are legitimate grievances that are out there in the community, and it's just wrong to sort of just dismiss this as One Nation in the same way as Hillary Clinton got it wrong when she talked about the basket of deplorables supporting Trump. You identify the grievances. This is the issue now. Yeah. And both major parties have this challenge at the moment. And I'm really disturbed about it because, One Nation is not going to be the answer to a lot of our problems. We need to see a stronger coalition. A strong opposition is really important in a democracy. And this needs to be addressed, though, with a serious policy debate.
Well, it seems like One Nation is becoming the opposition and the government is reacting to One Nation. I mean, they're about to release their immigration strategy, Tony Burke is. So, it is effectively now the opposition. I want to turn to other news now. The Herald Sun today revealing that court staff could be allowed to work from home in Victoria. That great headline, Bludge and Jury. Now, Steve, I mean, this working from home situation in Victoria is beyond a joke. Now court staff, and Steve, I mean, we're told this is apparently the latest bright spark to reduce backlogs and delays across the justice system. I mean, how does allowing people to work from home reduce delays across the court system?
Well, I wouldn't have thought it could. And latest figures to March show that there are 7,000 cases 7,000 in a backlog in the court system that they just can't get to. And so one of the social issues that we've got here is that people kept getting bail, and people go, well, how come this person who's been accused of a violent crime gets bail? Well, it's because if they put them on remand, they're going to spend 6 months to 10 months on remand. And there's been another development on this working from home this afternoon, with the Age reporting that the coalition is actually going to cave in and back Jacinta Allen's plan to allow you to demand that you work from home 2 days a week. It's going to be actually mandated. And the coalition said, OK, we've got 7 amendments we'd like to put into the legislation, but if you agree to that, this thing could be law by Thursday, and it's going to be in place, Sharri and Mike, by September 1. And we've got small businesses saying, well, we can't cope with that. And you've got the large business organisations today saying you would bomb Victoria back into the prehistoric age if you let this thing happen. So I don't know what the coalition's playing at. There's only one reason. They must think it's electorally popular.
Exactly.
And it will help get them votes during a campaign.
Oh, exactly. But it's dangerous to support it because, you know, already businesses are finding it so tough in this current economic climate. This will make it even more difficult. I don't know how businesses survive in Australia, quite frankly. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Mike, I want to turn to your neck of the woods in the ACT and this kind of funny but also worrying story about the Canberra opposition leader, a Liberal, Mark Parton, who was forced to defend himself after he admitted texting someone, "F my job is boring," during Senate estimates last week. Here's his defence of that text.
I've got an off-the-cuff larrikin communication style. We're also humans. People have the ability to send messages to people on their private devices that have got nothing to do with the public realm.
I mean, Mike, this is the first time this bloke is hitting the news. If he thinks his job boring, maybe he shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I guess everybody has their reflections on their jobs all the time. But what's kind of disturbing to me is how did we access these private communications? It's a deeper concern that I have. And look, you know, I know Mark, he is a knockabout bloke. You know, I think some of these other aspects, you know, they're matters for, you know, for him to resolve privately or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if you're not passionate about the job, then you don't want to hang around in it. But yeah, we all have our moments, so I wouldn't hold that against him.
I think if you're sitting in a Senate hearing, there's always, and you're texting, there's always people around you who can see your phone, unless you've got one of those black screens that stops people on the side seeing your phone. I've got to get one of those. Not that I ever say anything appropriate. I certainly wouldn't say my job is boring. It is never boring. I love this job, that's for sure. Steve, the AFL world just has blown up today after the Geelong Cats managed to get a player who was vulnerable to concussions to actually sign a contract absolving them of any future responsibility if he had brain trauma. I mean, this was such a serious issue. The clubs had an emergency meeting about it this morning.
Yeah, and they're going to come out and make a statement tomorrow. The complicating factor here is that one of the board members, when this deal was done with this player, Kolajasny, that, you know, if he got another concussion, he wouldn't have a claim against the club. Well, his name's Craig Drummond. He happens now to be the AFL commissioner. He's in charge of the whole circus. And so I don't know how he's going to deal with this. You've got the CEO at Geelong, he has come out and said, oh, well, it's nothing really to see here. Well, this is really a very serious issue. It's probably the biggest AFL issue that they've had since the Essendon drug scandal. I don't know how anybody at the top level that knew about this can survive it. We'll find out tomorrow. Geelong is always a club that seems to escape getting the right sort of penalties that they should get. They're out of town a little bit and they seem to get government money every time there's an election because they're on marginal seats. So we'll see what happens. But thoughts are with that player. He obviously is young. He wanted to keep playing. But they should not have offered someone who has a history of concussion with an opportunity to keep playing if he was in danger.
Yeah, it can be really dangerous with the risks to dementia. I guess but the way you're speaking about Geelong, it's obviously not the team that you support, Steve. You're a bit critical of them.
No, it isn't. Certainly not.
Mike, very quickly before we go, I just want to get your thoughts. I mean, you gave some comments to the Oz today, but why do you think the Royal Commission is excluding Josh Frydenberg?
It's a complete mystery to me, and there's no question in my mind that he should be called. I mean, Josh I know very well, and I'm privileged to be working with his mother, Erica, who's an amazing woman in her own right with deep expertise in psychology. She's just written a fantastic book about the Holocaust experience of the Frydenberg family, Do Not Forget Me Street, and it's a really fantastic read. People should read it if they want to understand some of these things. But the Frydenberg family was devastated in the Holocaust, many of them executed in Auschwitz. Erica herself survived being hidden in Budapest in Hungary and as a Holocaust survivor and came here, as destitute refugees. The story of these generational anti-Semitism experiences is deeply, enmeshed in the Frydenberg family experience. And that informed his policy initiative to fund Holocaust institutions around Australia, including the one that I'm working on at the moment, the National Holocaust Memorial Education Centre, and Eric is helping us with that. But he's also been, a leader of the Jewish community because of his background. People look to him, and I know particularly in the Melbourne community. So he can bring all of that to the table and the political experience of the security aspects of managing these things, etc.
But do you think this is political? Why wouldn't he be called? We've got to go, but just quickly. I
just don't know and don't understand why he wouldn't be called. And there's time. There's time. I know there's one more block, but the Royal Commission can deal with this, and I hope they do.
All right. Mike Kelly, Steve Price, great to see you. Well, still to come, show favourite Ray Hadley back on the desk to rip into Labor's cover-up over tax changes. That's after the break. Welcome back, and I'm joined now by radio legend and show favourite Ray Hadley, who, I read in the papers, is set to give evidence this week against Alan Jones in that bombshell trial, but we can't talk about it because it's before the courts.
Yeah, no, well, just a slight correction. It's not this week. In fact, when I heard it was this week, I started to get a bit worried because I hadn't had any provisions to go this week, but I will be required to give evidence probably in 2 or 3 weeks.
All right.
That's correct.
All right, we can't talk about it. As I said, it's before the courts.
Obviously.
So let's move on to Albanese Government Minister Jenny McAllister. And this
here's another failure.
With Andrew Clennell.
It's a race to the bottom. And, you've got Tony Burke, you've got Casanova Bowen, now Jenny. And Andrew Clennell, I have great,
Great journo.
Well, he's a great journo, good fella, but I really admire his patience.
Well, let's have a look at how patient he was.
Has it led to a decline in house prices this year?
Look, we see a range of factors weighing on the housing market and interest rates are obviously part of that, Andrew.
Has it led to a decline in house prices this year?
Look, we are seeing adjustments in the market, and that occurs from time to time. It happened in 2017 to 2019.
Is that a yes or a no, Minister?
Look, I mean, I think the data around house prices is there for people to see, but the Treasury modelling was that our changes would see house prices continue to grow in the medium term.
Do you think the tax changes this year have led to a decline in house prices or not?
Look, I think I've answered your question, Andrew.
Oh, no, but she had it 5 times, Ray. She wouldn't answer.
No, sorry, Jenny, you didn't answer the question. We're still left lamenting. Look, it's a very simple thing that we've been through here, as Andrew has been through, and they knew about it. Treasury officials knew that negative equity would fall into place when they were talking about the 5% deposit. So no matter where you're listening, let's pick a figure, $1 million, $50,000 deposit. You owe $950,000 on your mortgage. With the slump because of capital gains tax and negative gearing changes and an obvious increase in mortgage rates because of the inept display of the federal government, the house that was worth $950 or the property is now worth between $850 and $900. You owe $950. It's called negative equity. However, because of the system, if you do tumble, and we don't want people to tumble, and you can't pay the mortgage, the government fills in the gap. They've guaranteed any losses to the financial institutions. And it's not, of course, you can be earning $600,000 or $700,000. It's not means tested. It's rank stupidity. And then for a minister to sit there and say at the end of that rather convoluted conversation. I've answered your question, Andrew. She mustn't have heard the question because she didn't answer it.
No. I mean, what they've done to the economy and to the housing market is almost inexplicable.
Well, they must have had some idea that it was going to have the impact. And one of the things that's annoying at the moment for people, particularly in Sydney, where Western Sydney MPs are saying, oh, isn't it wonderful? The prices are coming down. The young ones can get in there and have their first home. No, you've got to have confidence if you're a home buyer.
Yeah.
And do we know yet in the capital cities, whether it's Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne, whether the market has plateaued, has it bottomed out? And we won't know if it's bottomed out until it starts to come up again. So those young people who are then taking the punt on buying a property with a 5% deposit, they may be entering negative equity as well because it mightn't have bottomed out the market yet. It mightn't have had the full effects of this stupidity of the government may have not have taken impact yet.
And Ray Albo's under virtually no pressure over any of this. I mean, he should be. Families, I mean, the cost of living crisis is worse than it's ever been. Inflation is still above target bound levels, 3 interest rate rises. And where's the pressure on the PM?
Well, that's because he surrounded himself with a group of dolts who were inept, and top of the list, of course, Burke and Casanova Bowen. And so the pressure's off him. He lets them make all the running, and they appear to be stupid, and he allows them to be stupid because it takes the pressure off him. If he was any sort of leader, if he was any sort of statesman, he's certainly not statesman-like, he'd enter the fray, he'd say, look, we've made a blue here. Yeah. We've made a blue. We're sorry we made a blue. We didn't do it intentionally. We thought the opposite would happen. It hasn't happened, so we're going to change things around. But he just keeps digging in and digging in and digging in.
Out of that whole cabinet table, none of them have ever owned a business. None of them probably have ever owned shares. I mean, they've got no real world experience.
Well, they own plenty of properties between them.
Yeah, the properties. Or at least their house, in any case. Yeah, they probably have taken advantage of negative gearing too.
No, we couldn't accuse them of doing that. That'd be wrong.
All right, well, let's have a quick look at the University of Sydney.
Oh, no, please. Do you have to do this? Honestly, the ulcer was going down. The blood pressure's under control.
I'm just worried about the diagnosis from your doctor. He's going to say, you've got to stop going on Sharri's show. It's not good for your health.
Well, he has given me extra blood thinners, so maybe that's something to do with it.
So the students at the University of Sydney are outraged because there was a Coca-Cola stand on campus.
If you're a USyd student, you might have seen this huge Coca-Cola stand here at Welcome Fest this year. Coca-Cola is also one of the companies that are listed on the boycott, divest and sanction list, specifically for their complicity in Israeli illegal occupation of the West Bank.
Yeah, I mean, demanding a boycott, Ray.
Look, I've mentioned my old mate Vince Rennie a number of times. He did a tour last year called I'm Offended. I'm sick of people being offended. They're offended by everything. And the university students, that young lady included, need to pull their head in because we're looking for wood. I mean, get offended by something really important. Not that Coca-Cola have some sort of standard of supporting the university faculty. I mean, for goodness sake, it's a soft drink.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. All right, well, before you go, Kyle Sandilands, I mean, he used to be on another radio show to you, not quite a rival, but another show.
Oh, no, we had plenty of battles, Kyle, over the years, yeah.
He had his first news show today and he had the Premier, Chris Minns, on, but he was kind of having a blow-up as the Premier walked in and it was a little bit awkward for poor old Chris Minns. Have a look.
Don't yell at me. I'm not yelling.
Hello, Premier. I need to hear what we're putting on the radio.
Yes.
Bring it in here on a app if need be. Dead.
Premier's just arrived.
Hi, Premier.
How is that?
I know.
How is that?
Look, Minns was just trying to sneak away
I
there.
feel his pain. I have to admit that during my 40 years, that happened to me a number of times. And it's very hard to restrain yourself when you're talking to a microphone and nothing's coming out the other end. I remember once at 4BC in Brisbane, I was broadcasting. The phone stopped working. The internet stopped working. The only thing that was live was the microphone. And I was there for 3 hours. This happened 15 minutes into the program. and there are techs running around everywhere, pulling things in, pulling things out. And it is, I feel his pain. Eventually what happened to me, and you've got to keep this one in your back pocket, Troy Cassadaly's mother-in-law was listening to the program, and she rang Laurel, his wife, and said, "Raise in strife at 4BC." So Troy turned up with a guitar and sang for 2.5 hours. My ulcer got smaller, and the listeners were thoroughly entertained by Australia's leading country music artist.
Ray, I don't believe you would have had a second of silent air. You can talk hours and hours on end.
Underwater with a mouthful of marbles. Okay?
As they say. Ray Hadley, great to see you.
Thanks, Sharri.
Thank you.
Good.
All right, still to come, how the housing crunch is hitting the big four banks. That's next with fund manager Russell Pillemer. Well, Westpac's results came out today and it wasn't good news. Mortgage applications slumped 11% in the June quarter, with all evidence pointing to a housing crunch caused by Labor's tax changes. For more, Pengana Capital CEO Russell Pillemer joins me now in studio. Well, Russell, these results are obviously terrible. Is this a reflection of what the government has done to the housing market, also combined with the interest rates coming down?
Yes, so I think...
Sorry, interest rates going up.
Going up. If only coming down.
If only, exactly.
So Sharri, I think it absolutely is the result of policy, and I think time and time again governments don't learn their lessons, that it's never a good idea to play with economic settings in order to achieve political outcomes. And wealth redistribution is the classic case. And so I think the key issue for governments is they don't understand the second order and third order effects of what they do. So it sounded like a great idea. Let's make it really difficult for investors to buy into housing, and therefore homeowners can pick up the slack and buy things cheaper. Sounds great. But what actually happens is, in a falling market, there's no confidence from prospective homeowners. You don't want to be buying and only to find out that you've got negative equity value in your home. So investors stop buying, homeowners stop buying, and then on the other side of the equation, existing owners don't want to sell because they've seen higher prices and they don't want to be now selling at lower prices. So the market freezes up, and we've seen this in auction clearance rates. And then I think what we'll see is a third order effects as well. So for instance, Westpac is in everybody's investment portfolios, superannuation funds.
A lot of mum and dads.
And the other banks as well, and they'll all get hit like this. And therefore, what's going to happen is people will feel poorer, and it will be a vicious cycle. So this is not a good situation to be in.
So it was, the Albanese government was trying to correct what it saw as inequality, but obviously this has far-reaching consequences.
This is just another one of those involvements that should go into the dustbin of failed attempts at wealth redistribution.
Perhaps, yeah, if only with the rest of the Albanese government. All right, I want to turn to this story that's making global headlines. It's a 24-year-old, Leopold Aschenbrenner. He built a $45 billion AI fund, as I understand it. But then just in a few weeks' time, there was this catastrophic loss. He lost $35 billion in July, in just a few weeks. So, Russell, why is this getting so much publicity, and how did a 24-year-old firstly come to have a $45 billion fund, and how did it all go so wrong for him?
Yeah, so this is better than any Hollywood movie. Leopold, 2 years ago, was a relatively lowly worker at OpenAI, which is the maker of ChatGPT. And Leopold left under a bit of a cloud. He wrote an essay, and in that essay he described how the value of chip makers is very, understated, and he predicted that they will go up rapidly over the coming years, as well as some other AI infrastructure providers. He got a nice little stake in Anthropic, which is very valuable, and through the essay and the stake in Anthropic, he was able to raise some money. He raised about $200 million, and he performed extraordinarily well. The market for chip makers has done fantastically. Leopold wasn't satisfied just to get the underlying returns from these stocks. He wanted more. And so what he did is he took out margin loans, or he geared up his fund. And that worked out fantastically. In a rising market, when you put gearing on, your returns are even higher. And so he attracted more and more investors and got more and more gearing. This was all going fantastically well until several weeks ago, when these chipmaker stocks had a bit of a stumble. Now, it wasn't a massive stumble compared to how much they've grown over the last 2 years, but it was quite a significant stumble. And Leopold's margin loan went into default. He didn't have enough margin. The banks, he could either pay in cash, or the banks could take control of the portfolio and sell it. And that's what they did. He didn't have the cash. And what happened is, you'll be amazed to know that at the top end of the market, information flows quite freely. So everybody knew that Leopold had a problem. Everybody knew that these stocks were going to hit the market, and there were a lot of them. And so the prices started going down and down because people were shorting the stocks and positioning themselves for this stock to flood the market. Nobody wanted to buy the stocks because we have this expression in finance markets about catching a falling knife. And so nobody wanted to catch that. And this all changed, and it needed to be a circuit breaker. And one night, Ken Griffin from Citadel, which is one of the biggest hedge fund managers in the world, Ken Griffin went and bought almost the entire portfolio from the banks at a 10% discount to their value. By the next day, the market became aware that the crisis was over, and the stocks rocketed back up again. Ken Griffin made I think something where $4 to $4.5 billion on the trade, one of the greatest trades ever.
Wow.
And Leopold, his fund went down from 45 billion to 10 billion.
Massive. I mean, perhaps, I don't know if it's a warning to those investing in AI. I mean, most people don't raise $200 million and grow a $45 billion stock, but it's
look, I don't
volatile.
think it was systematic. It was really reflective of the gearing that he put into the fund. I mean, Leopold, amazingly, is not down and out at all. You know, 3 days after he lost 35 billion, he got married to a lady who is one of the key people at Anthropic. So presumably she has lots of Anthropic stock. And then last week he made his most audacious move ever. He put $400 million into a new startup that's only 1 year old.
So I'm sure we're only hearing just the start of him then. All right, Russell Pillimer, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate the insights, as always. All right, still to come, how Anthony Fauci could face prison if he's found to have deleted records on his mobile phone. That's next. Welcome back, and joining me now, News24 contributor Kosha Garda. Kosha, great to see you. Look, I want to start with Michigan Democrat Abdel El-Sayed. I mean, he was only just elected as this socialist nominee. He's already in a feud with President Trump. Trump posted this photo comparing the two. El-Sayed then went on CNN with this rant.
And actually, Sarah and I like each other. I don't know about the First Lady and the President, but from what I've heard, it's a bit of a rocky road.
What do you think of this spat now playing out?
El-Sayed is a political challenge. I will say this, I've said it before, dismiss him, Mamdani, people like that at your own peril, because even though they are extremely radical in their positions and all the rest of it, they are talented communicators. They know how to control media cycles, and one fail-safe way to do that is to create a spat, or at least respond or amplify to a spat with President Trump. And here he is all around the international news cycle. I think what they do also, these talented communicators, is they'll pick at something that maybe a sizable or non-insignificant portion of the world believes might be true. You know, rumors spread all the time about relationships of public figures, and Trump is obviously very controversial. So plucking at that and giving it credence, I think, is exactly his strategy, and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, worrying figure, both of them, El-Sayed and Mamdani, with their communist terrorist sympathies as well. Disgraced Anthony Fauci, he could be in serious strife, Kosha. The Senate investigating his actions. They've got a copy of his phone, and they're looking at whether he might have deleted anything.
Yes, so this saga obviously continues. One of the most infamous people who received a presidential pardon in history, obviously a very polarizing figure. So where this legally is going to wind up is how much of what he has done and his conduct that they're going after falls within the pardon, and where Biden's pardon shields him, which is from 2014 up until January of 2026. So the question is, if he deleted anything after January 2026, which is what they're investigating, there are statutes there that would be obstruction of justice or deleting federal property. Or the states can also go after him because the pardon is only applicable to at the federal level and not at the state level. But I think the real thing is, does anybody have the political will to really do it? Because he is polarizing. And while millions of people really despise Anthony Fauci, there are millions who still revere him, or at least pretend to. And I'm not sure that the Republicans are going to have the stomach to go all in for that. But there are some, Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, who seem to not be letting go of this. So we shall see.
Yeah, no, Rand Paul's doing a great job, that's for sure. Very quickly, Kosha, Benjamin Netanyahu rejecting Trump's backed plan for Gaza. I mean, he has every right to do this on the one hand if Hamas isn't properly disarmed.
He does absolutely have the right to do this for his country, and we know that this is always going to be a tough negotiation. He's doing it, of course, against a backdrop of a trickier and stickier court of public opinion that he personally is facing and that Israel is facing as this continues, this war, and the biggest and strongest ally, the U.S., as we know, it's not popular at all back home. So he's juggling public opinion with this opportunity that he has to really do damage into that region, something that has not been done at this level for decades.
Kosha Garda, thank you so much as always, and I'll see you tomorrow at 8. And here's Paul Murray.